Hello, my name is Asia Beard, and I'm the CEO and Principal Consultant of Ask Asia Restaurant Consulting. In my episode of the Business Growth Architect Show, I'll reveal strategies on how to start a successful food service business. Join us for tips on increasing profitability, adding new streams of revenue, and some community impact stories. Can't wait to see you there.
Welcome to the Business Growth Architect Show. I am Beate Gillette. I am the host. I want to welcome you to our globally top 10% ranked podcast, where you will hear from industry experts about the strategies that are working right now to unlock hidden opportunities in any market so that you can grow your authority and scale your impact. And now let's get started with the show. And welcome back. This is your host, Beate Gillette from the Business Growth Architect Show. I asked my friend Asia to come on the call and talk about systems and strategies and how to grow a business, but it's not what we typically talk about because you are a restaurant consultant. Asia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love being here.
Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, my name is Asia Beard. I'm the CEO and Principal Consultant of Ask Asia Restaurant Consulting. And what we provide are the fundamentals for small business owners to really grow their business, specifically in the food service industry. So not just restaurants that are brick and mortar, but if they're looking to launch a food truck, if they're a caterer, or even if they're a cottage food business, which is a home-based business, I provide them with systems that will make them not only profitable, but ensure that they have a long-term growth strategy. And so it's exciting. It's always something new, and I meet people from all walks of life, but I'm really excited more about helping people in my community and making sure that they, build a healthy business.
I like that you said that because one thing when I first met you that really stuck with me was that you have this passion, not just to go after the high-end restaurants, but that this is really about making sure that your favorite taco place or your favorite Italian place in your neighborhood actually survives because a lot of these businesses are family businesses. So tell me a little bit about where is that community-driven aspect coming from for you?
I actually come from a corporate background. And so I think being entrenched in that for so long and seeing how you could work for a company for very many years and put blood, sweat, and tears in it, and you are still sort of just a cog in a wheel. And what I enjoyed when I decided to finally leave that corporate culture, I just kind of stumbled across some small businesses that really needed some of the strategic help that's just innately built into corporate restaurants that they just didn't have because they were launching a business on their own. It could have been something that they just had a good idea and they thought, well, let me just try it. Or it could have been passed down from a family member, but they didn't have the infrastructure that they needed to really develop. And so it kind of was a little niche that I fell into. And I was finding a lot of these businesses were in my own community. Like you said, the local taco stand or the soul food place or the Jamaican place or, some other type of small family business. It's dishing up great food, but they don't really understand food costs. Or they've got family members that are working, but they don't really understand labor costs. And so helping them to navigate, well, what do I need to make sure that not only am I profitable, but that this business survives so I can pass it on in a healthy way to my family members or just to be a beacon in the community. It really kind of came from just stumbling across those businesses that were struggling and closing. And I just thought if they can take some of this knowledge that I've learned from being in the corporate world and apply it to their small business, they can still be fruitful and they can actually probably run that business much more efficiently and be more profitable and stay that gem in the community or stay something that they can pass on that generational wealth between their families. So kind of a passion project.
Where I see it is like you have this great place that is down the street and then something happens and then suddenly this business is out of business and then you are crushed. Or you have this neighborhood corner where finally there's a restaurant and they never make it at that corner. And then you think, is the corner cursed? Because
Right.
It's like everybody is in that corner, never makes it. And then you wonder, it's like, what is it that they don't do? So can you take us through, like, what is something that you see specifically in the food industry where there's a misconception, a misunderstanding on how they look at how businesses run? And I want really to encourage all of our listeners to really pay attention to this, because the best stuff always comes from outside of other industries. We have a lot of coaches and consultants. We don't talk a lot about restaurants, but I find that when I hear something from a different industry, oftentimes there's something like, oh, I can use that for my industry. So that's what just a heads up for everybody, really listen to this. So what typically happens in the restaurant industry, and I know you mentioned one thing, they don't know their margins. So what are some of the things that they struggle with?
So I'd say there's 3 that are consistently in the top 5 to 6 problems that I'm running into, but the top 3, number 1 would be lack of capital. So people not understanding how much money they need to get that business up and running, but not just up and running, but to sustain it. So whenever I'm putting together numbers or projections for folks, I'm looking at, 12 months in, 18 months in, how much money do you need? Startup money do you need to sustain it? Because it's not like you build it and all of a sudden everybody comes. There are definitely those restaurants that get lucky, or, they have a lot of promotion behind them and they get kind of jam-packed right away. But a lot of our businesses don't start that way. It's sort of a very soft opening that continues to build momentum. So you need to have money in the bank to help maintain payroll, to help maintain all of the vendor invoices. So that way, when you get consistent business, maybe 12 months in, you didn't run out of gas on the way there. So definitely not enough capital. 2 would be just not enough experience. I feel like people assume incorrectly that the restaurant industry is easy. And, on the surface, it does seem easy. We cook good food and I'm nice to you. That's all. That's what our business is, right? But so many other layers to that. And because people come in with this naive conception of it's easy, they really miss a lot of the fundamentals that are needed in order to help them survive. So we talked about margins, but one of the big things I'm running into is people don't know their food costs. They don't know their labor costs. They don't know their overhead costs. And these 3 components can make up anywhere between 70 to 80% of your sales. So if you don't know those things going in and you're not prepared for that, and you're working with a very slim margin, usually a lot of restaurants, anywhere between 5 and 10% is their profit margin. When you do add in alcohol, it goes up to about 15, 20%. But that's still pretty slim. So if you haven't figured out where things need to go in those other categories and you're mismanaging your budget, you very quickly will go under. So I would say that. And then the third thing that I'm running into is just the people not having the resources to tap into when they do need help, not having mentors that they can go to, or a consultant that they can reach out to, maybe somebody in their own family or network. They haven't done it. They're the first ones doing it. Their learning curve is huge and they're going through all these hurdles on their own. And it can be daunting where you're like, why am I doing this again? You can feel as though it's just not worth it. And you get discouraged very easily because you're not seeing a ton of profit right away. So usually it's those 3 things: the lack of capital, the lack of experience, and the lack of resources.
So you're saying that just because I have mom's recipe for her chili, that doesn't necessarily constitute.
Please don't run out and open up a chili store. Don't do it. I'm really big on, especially when people are first starting out and they're just getting their feet wet, on proof of concept. You may have tons of people that enjoy what you make for Thanksgiving or when you come around for the holidays, and you always bring this banana pudding that everybody enjoys. But are people who are strangers who don't know you, are they going to pay you for that? And are they going to pay you the right amount that you need to make it profitable for you? And so there's just so many other things that you need to consider outside of just, does it taste good? And not to throw too much shade at some of these corporate franchises, but there's a lot of franchises out there that I think anybody can say, well, I can make a burger better than this place, or I can make a taco better than this place. But why aren't they? Right? And why are these places that have mediocre food, why are they so successful in opening hundreds of locations across the country? And it really kind of boils down to systems and understanding their numbers and working those margins to their advantage.
So there's a lot of parallels that I'm hearing here to what we normally talk about in, the proof of concept is the idea. What is the idea? What makes you different? Yeah, right. I had to chuckle. I make a really good German potato salad. Every holiday, I have a fan club, and they're like, "Did you make it? Did you make it this time?" Now my wheels are spinning. It's like, is there enough demand for German potato salad for me?
Right. And are they going to pay you for it now when they're used to getting it for free? Right?
Yeah, that is a whole other story. I'm pretty sure that people will tell you whatever they need to tell you So they get more of their favorite food from you, but that will they be paying for it? Some of these fundamentals that you talked about, making sure you have the money, make sure you understand what your concept is, having tested the concept. Let's dive into the testing the concept a little bit.
Okay.
What are some of the ideas on how you help people, obviously specifically in your industry, to test the concept? Because I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. So they love my banana pudding. And I feel that there's banana pudding opportunities. I've watched Shark Tank.
Right.
I've seen banana puddings blow up. So where do I start?
So I'd love to talk about one of my clients who congratulations to her, just opened up her brick and mortar location. But let's go back to the very beginning. Her name is Kirsten. She's the owner of the very best cookie in the whole wide world. When she came to me a couple of years ago, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. She'd been laid off. And she makes this amazing chocolate chip cookie. And same thing, her family's like, you should sell these. These are so good. And so she wanted to figure out, well, is this a viable option? Should I open up a chocolate chip cookie business? So the first thing I said was, well, number one, you can't have just one item on your menu. You need to have multiple items. She's like, no. Chocolate chip cookies, that's everybody's favorite. It's a classic. It's the most popular cookie. I'm like, yes, but this is not the only cookie that's out there that people will enjoy. And if you've got a really great base on your dough, I'm sure there's other things that you can pivot and make into other items. And especially if we do e-commerce, you want to be able to offer a variety pack. And for the people who just don't like chocolate or they want something different, there is another option for them. So she did end up coming with a couple of other options. The Sinner, which is sort of like a snickerdoodle cinnamon sugar cookie. She started adding nuts to her original chocolate chip cookie. And now she's got the butter pecan. And then she added an oatmeal raisin and then an oatmeal chocolate chip. And so 2.5 years later, she's probably about 30 different options. But in the sort of humble beginnings was just figuring out, well, is this a viable concept? And I was like, yes, it is, as long as you implement a few other options and let's see what happens. She started off by doing Ding Dong Ditch, where she would just deliver cookies to friends and family. And then, they, again, were pumping her up and saying, this is really great. You should sell these. And then she started getting inquiries, not just from those friends and family, but from people that would taste from what the friends and family would give to them, saying, hey, we want to buy your cookies. So we started off very modestly with a cottage food license. And so that means you're allowed to make it out of your home. And what I liked about Kirsten's Space is that we paced it correctly. We didn't go out and buy a storefront or lease a storefront, spend all this money in advertising, none of that. No, we started with getting proof of concept by getting the easy entry permit to legally launch her business. So she started with that. Very soon after, within a few months, she sort of outgrew her home kitchen. So we reached out and found a co-packer that would help her with producing more volume. So she was able to now expand her business. She was able to start shipping now. She was able to do third-party deliveries using services. And by this time, she had consistent business. She had, over a year's worth of data and how the seasons impact her business, right? It's obviously much busier during the holidays and people giving gifts versus times, maybe in the summer where it's a little bit slower and people are just not ordering as much because it's hot and they want ice cream or they want something else. And so having that seasonality helped her put together projections for if she were to grow even further, what would this look like in a store? And so she started then looking at, okay, well, these are my profit margins. With this, if I now add rent and I now add utilities, and now what does that chip away? And how much more money do I need to generate in order to cover those additional expenses? And so, it did take a little while. It took about 2.5 years, which I personally don't think is very long.
No, it's like nothing.
Yeah, I think people might think that years sounds like a long time, but the time flies by much faster than you think, especially when you're an entrepreneur. And so now,
especially when you're eating cookies. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And she looked at a couple of different places. Not all of them, fell through. And when you know your numbers, you can walk away from certain opportunities or deals that are put on the table that may not seem like the best deal when you start to calculate everything. And so having a good foundation of knowing her numbers, knowing her margins, knowing, the consistent business, the seasonality of it, she could walk away from certain opportunities. But she, a really great opportunity fell into her lap with another vendor who also does sort of like cookie dough items left behind a location. And so she just opened up, soft opening was this past weekend over off of Robertson. and has this wonderful brick and mortar location that fits all of her needs, checks the boxes, had a lot of the equipment that she needed already. And now, I mean, she's just up and running, up and thriving. And she's been featured on the news. She's been featured in magazines. She's done a lot of collaborations with some influencers. So she's had some really great success, but it really started with getting that proof of concept and making sure that everything was dialed in before you went full throttle. And that's really what I preach.
It's not just for people in the restaurant industry, really. Right. It's like this. It's like this for everybody. I like that there is a clarity of the path of saying just because one person tells you that you're great, and that person often is your mom, right, or somebody who you like, or right, a relative, or people who've benefited from your advice for free or the goods for free for a while. There really is something to be said to go about this step by step. So you are very systematic in how you take your clients through the client transformation journey. Will you tell us what is this system that you're using and what are the steps? So proof of concept, I would assume, is obviously right there in the very front.
There's some variances depending on where that client is. If I have someone that is already established, for instance, I have a client, it's a legacy bakery, 27th Street Bakery. They've been around for 60 years. Right. So I'm not going to come to them with the exact same system as someone who, like a Kirsten, who is just starting out. So I will tailor it to, where that client is. But if you are starting out, I first walk you through, I want to know your budget. How much money are you working with, and how much money do you think it's going to take to get this concept launched? Because I've had people come to me and say, I've got 10 grand saved, or I've got 25 grand saved. And I have to have a very quick come to Jesus speech about that is not enough money to launch you the right way. And so I do talk about capital in the very beginning because I want to lay out what you can expect. I go through the licensing that you would need to make sure that you're legitimately operating above board. I go through your costs. I want to know, what are the food costs? So that means you already have to have a menu that you've put together, which means you also have vendors that you're sourcing these ingredients from, so we can calculate your food costs. And then I walk you through the labor, because it's not just you, right? If you open up a business, you can't do everything, right? If you're doing a cottage food business, you may start off doing everything on your own. But if you're looking to open a brick and mortar location, you're hiring a team. And so I want you to understand what that cost is going to be. And so we start working through the numbers. So everything starts with the numbers, and then my system is building on top of that and kind of breaking that down. But if you're somebody that is already established, so let's go back to 27th Street Bakery, I want to figure out, how can I help you to be more profitable? And so one of the challenges that they were having is, as busy as they were, as many contracts that they had, they just weren't making the profit that they needed to make. And they really couldn't afford to pay themselves, the owners themselves. And so we went back through the numbers and said, well, let's calculate everything. Let's calculate your food costs and see what your margins are. And believe it or not, they had never done that before. As long as they had been open, it just wasn't something that was ever talked about. And because this is a business that's being passed down from grandmother to next generation, they're just saying, this is how we do it, and this is how we've always done it. They're not going back outside of the box. So that's what we did. We figured out what their food costs were, and we figured out, well, we need to start charging a little bit more because you're not making enough margin to offset all of your other expenses. We did that. And then we looked at labor. We looked at, once we got their pricing in order, we put the owners on payroll so they could pull a salary out of the business. And we looked at other parts of their systems to see, well, what else can we do? How else can we drive revenue? So upgrading their website so that way they could start doing e-commerce. And so now they're actually able to ship out pies. And that just opened up a whole other stream of revenue. And then once you have a website that is, your SEO is ranking the way it needs to, people start to find you, right? They find you, different demographics are going to find you. Different opportunities will start coming your way. And that's what started happening. She was invited to now have her pies at the Staples Center. She was invited now to have other wholesale contracts. And so we really start to systematically do to not only grow the business, but to help drive more revenue to the bottom line.
So I would call these vertical expansion opportunities. So you were saying that when you are in a business like a restaurant or like food, that there are more than one ways to grow the business as well.
Absolutely.
So Asia, you talked about finding vertical expansions. In my world, that is, why would I do X? Why would I sell them one by one if I can sell 500? So How do you do that? How do you tell your clients to do that?
So there's definitely wholesale opportunities. There are third-party opportunities. I would say looking at what businesses align with the products that you are currently selling. So for instance, I'm working with a client, Slack Hospitality, and they have a contract with the Natural History Museum where they have a cafe there. They partnered up with John Cleveland of Post and Beam, who's created Neighborhood Grill. And so they have a vertical where they've expanded Slack Hospitality to now include this additional restaurant. And so that restaurant has a grab and go cooler. And so I've added a community aspect to it. So piggybacking off of the small business passion of mine, bringing in clients who can sell their product at a wholesale in a wholesale environment, which is an extension of themselves. So a lot of these clients either have their street vendors, or they are caterers, or they have their own brick and mortar. And so they're selling things one-on-one to clients, but if they now are selling to me at a wholesale price, which is now going to be put into the Natural History Museum, they're expanding their reach. They'll see their name in the restaurant at the Natural History Museum. And so these are wholesale opportunities, which are an extension of the vertical growth that you mentioned before. Other opportunities would be to do additional catering. And sometimes it's not even selling your food. I tell clients all the time, make sure you get a really good looking logo, because you can put that on a t-shirt, you can make it a keychain. If you have clients that really love your product, they will buy that. You can make a little gift basket for the holidays that has a gift card and then, a merchandise item. So, if you're a coffee shop, don't just look at, selling the coffee, but look at mugs and look at bags of coffee. Look at opportunities where you can become a coffee vendor for a restaurant. Another client, Coffee Confessionals, Jing Ling. She is the preferred coffee vendor for a new restaurant that opened up. So even though she doesn't have a brick and mortar location, she has an online coffee business. She's become their preferred vendor. So every time somebody opens up a menu at this restaurant, they're seeing her name, not only for the coffee, but they also added her in as an espresso creme brulee. So they're seeing her name on the dessert menu. So looking for parallels or collaborations, even if you're hosting a pop-up, event in your location, so you're partnering up with another brand, that helps to grow not only your brand, but the other brand, but also to get people to see that you're open to these new opportunities. And they can invite you in to do things in their locations. So there's lots of verticals in the restaurant industry. I feel like that's one area where once a brand is established, I'm like, okay, it's not just about finding location 2 and 3. It's how can we build out of location 1, 3 or 4 other streams of revenue.
I love that. So we'll talk about community building in just one moment, right after this message. Are you looking for the hidden opportunities for you in this market? Or are you simply wanting to figure out what is your unique differentiation factor that makes clients want to work with you and not your competitors? If this resonates, I want to invite you to go to uncoverysession.com and schedule your 15-minute complimentary uncovery session with one of our business growth advisors that will take you through what your number one business growth blocker is, what you can do to remove it, and what your very best next step should be. And now let's get back to the show. Beate here with Asia, talking about vertical expansion, finding opportunities that you may not normally would think about. And you have talked a lot about things that we also talked about on the show. What about if we add a product? What about if we go outside of our comfort zone? Can we design a great logo, build a community that then are super fans, ambassadors, and going out?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So how do we do that? Because everybody thinks going on Instagram, being an influencer is the way to go. But I know you do all of this through community. What tips can you give our listeners to say, have you thought about building your community in your community by doing maybe some or all of these things?
So I definitely encourage all of my clients to network as much as possible. Signing up with their local chamber of commerce, finding the different small business centers, partnering with local businesses. Instagram is great. I'm not saying don't use that. That's definitely a strategy, and you can use that to help grow your business exponentially. I have clients that all they do is Instagram and they're very successful. But for folks who maybe are a little more social media shy or need ways to kind of be on Instagram, reaching out to those Facebook communities, reaching out to local community centers, even sometimes just joining in and doing a little bit of volunteer work just to build your network. There have been opportunities that have come up just because somebody met you at an event.
We did.
Boom. Exactly. You and I
did. Yeah, we were both on a pitch event and we were both judges. Mm-hmm. And I looked at you and I'm like, that girl got it going on.
Yes, thank you. And I was like, I want to talk to this person. I want this person to be somebody that's in my network. So really looking for opportunities just outside of social media, something about that human connection, the energy that you're feeling with somebody. And following up, do what you say you're going to do. You know, if you get somebody's business card, make sure you send that follow-up email or connect with them on LinkedIn, make that connection, because you would be surprised at how many opportunities come out of just talking to someone versus waiting for somebody to pick you out, you know, on an Instagram feed.
I like that you said that part of our strategy is that we have strategy conversations with everybody that we have on the podcast and every podcast that we are on. And that is to share our expertise about business building with them, complimentary, because they've given us exposure or they helped us to grow our podcast. And then also to make sure that they know what we do so they can refer us. And sometimes, ever so often, somebody becomes a client and says, oh, that's really interesting. That sounds like something I need to be doing. So in the food industry or in restaurant or all of these things, I feel like we covered a lot. What interests me a lot is I would have thought that the Natural History Museum would have a predetermined, pre-approved list of vendors. And that the Getty Museum has a pre-approved list of vendors, and it's very difficult to get into these things. But you don't make it sound like it's very difficult. So what's the truth
I don't want to
here?
give that impression. There's definitely an upward climb. But what I love about Slack Hospitality is that they are opening the doors for other small businesses. So there is a whole bid process. There's an RFP process, and you do bid on this contract. And they were awarded this contract out of other really big food service companies who also bid. So it was pretty substantial. This is kind of a historical partnership with Slack Hospitality and the Natural History Museum. And so I love that they are, again, expanding their reach by including community members. But we're going to start looking at other contracts as well and say, if we can successfully operate not only a grill, a community cooler, catering, and be a vendor that can handle the velocity of the Natural History Museum, we can certainly handle that at the Getty or at the new Lucas Museum. And so we are going to start bidding on those contracts as well. But there is a bidding process. But I do believe that if anybody's been in a bid process, that they're subcontractors. So there are opportunities for small businesses to get their foot in the door. But it usually comes out of who do you know and the network that you have. People are going to reach out to folks that they know and they trust. So that's why it is important that you get in front of some of these, you know, bigger organizations and let them know who you are. Even if it means dropping off samples or getting to know them, you know, by volunteering at their organization and letting them know who you are, it just goes a long way. But a lot of those social circles are built through this networking process.
So what I'm hearing you really promote is that, number one, get really clear about what it is that you want to do, test the concept, make sure that all of this part is in place, make sure you have enough money,
right.
And then you map out for at least 12 to 18 months to have enough capital, because that's just how long it takes.
Yes.
You can build the field, but they don't come overnight. It just often takes a little bit of time.
Yes.
Then you said that you are a big promoter of these networking opportunities and really also be involved in the community aspect of it. I think a lot of people don't believe the Small Business Administration or the SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers, or these smaller community centers that are all helping businesses within their community to thrive, but it gets you a lot of visibility. In my experience, I will say, I don't think there's a lot of high ticket sales in that, but there is definitely a different kind of a volume. And if you have the right product market fit, then you can make sure that you have something that works for this particular audience and then start building your business. And being around and then looking immediately for these opportunities. That sounds wonderful. For somebody who now has whetted their appetite for some food consulting, where do they find you and how can we put them in touch with you?
Oh, absolutely. So you can always go to my website, which is askasia.com. Super simple, ASKAJA. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Asia Beard, and then on Instagram at Ask Asia Restaurant Consulting. Would love to connect with them.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the call. I'm relieved to see that in the food industry, the basics are no different than in any other industry. You still all need to do the same things. So I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to share this with our audience.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure as well. Thank you.
And that's it for us today. Thank you all so much for being here. And until next time, this is your host, Beate Chalette, and goodbye. Thank you for listening to or watching the show. We are so excited that you're here and we are very grateful for you. Now it's our turn to ask you for help. Please do share this episode with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. If there's any question you have about business, please do reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget to schedule your complimentary Uncovery session at uncoverysession.com, where one of our business growth advisors will help you to figure out what your number one business growth blocker is in only 15 minutes. And that's it for us today. Until next time.